What is music? Hi, I'm John. Welcome to Philosopher's Corner. What is music? Most of us have heard music. Almost everyone's aware that it exists, and it crosses all cultures across the globe. But what is music? The standard definition of music is that it's thematic sounds set to time, right? Sound set to time with a thematic element. It's a good place to start. Like, music is one of the fundamental arts and I would say forces in the world. But a lot of people have had a lot of thoughts about what music is, and they've tried to break it down. So, you know, what have other people said about music? They said they the general general consensus with a lot of people, a lot of philosophers, a lot of thinkers about music is that music is it's a mentally prepared art form, and they restrict music to being a series of notes, to being a series of sounds, prescribed sounds set to time that have intention. The intention is, emotional experience or listener immersion, whatever the intent is. So the more classical thinkers who really want to sort of define music and make it simply art. Simply it's a discipline in the arts that has an effect. No different than any other art form. It just happens to be a different discipline that deals with sound and time, which I understand that. Obviously I get that that's the case. And even within that, if we go deep into that and we say, okay, the sound and the time to them is, it's like very mystical of, okay, so it attempts to elicit emotions, and a lot of them, they don't really go into why does it elicit emotion, right? Just on the basics. Why does a note make a person feel something, right? Now, interestingly enough, there are many philosophers who even try to parse out the emotion, say, well, music's not even an emotional experience, it's a sonic experience. It can be devoid of emotion, right? Yeah, go down that one. But back to the real world where sound causes emotion of some kind, how does that happen, right? Philosophically, why is that happening? Well, we live in a vibratory world. All of our stimulation, all of the existence of life is vibratory. Sound, which is essentially, that's the base ingredient for music, is simply it's simply vibration. It's simply a sine wave traveling through the world on a certain energy and frequency. And the different frequency creates the different tone. That's how that's how sound works. When it vibrates on different frequencies in different ways, you get a different sound, right? And then when we cross-reference that with all the deeper, insightful discoveries of the human operating system, which include chakras, but even before we get to chakras, other organs, other parts of the brain, when the sound comes in, it stimulates different parts of us. It stimulates memories, it stimulates emotional recall, all sorts of things. And when it gets to the chakras, we now know that different frequencies stimulate different areas of the chakras. So, like, certain notes in the tonic scale elicit different reactions. Like, that's, for instance, something very basic, like when you hit huge bass notes, whether it's like, low on the keyboard in tone, or the kick of a bass drum in a rock and roll song, or the sound of a bass in a hip hop song, or the big drums in a classical symphony. It excites the lower regions of the body, of the chakras, and thus all of those associated emotions and intentions, like uh, sex, war, root chakra stuff, uh, Nothing gets a dance floor going like a big heavy bass beat, and nothing sounds the drums of war like big huge drums, right? And that's because it's entering into the first and second chakras with those frequencies, and you can, those are just, you can do those every time and they will work. You can do it too. And it's not just humans. We're going to stay focused on humans for music, but music does go across the entire spectrum of reality. Like other beings are affected. We won't even restrict it to humans. So now with that example, like with a bass drum, brings out the sex, brings out the aggression, and brings out all sorts of things. That is true for essentially the entire musical scale, all the way like from here all the way up to crown chakra, like high thoughts. When you get into, as evidenced by when you get into meditative frequencies and like high level classical music, or somebody, Whitney Houston and I Will Always Love You, hit that high note, brings you up here, like all the feelings, like all the thoughts, all the life experiences, right? And when they get to those really high notes, it brings you up, right? You go from the low notes to the high notes, and you can notice that the emotional experience migrates with the tonal range of the frequencies of the notes. So we're already seeing that it's not a mystical relation between the music and the emotions it's eliciting. It's science. Like, there's actual frequency science happening, and it's backed up. It's backed up by literal science, where you can take it to the lab and check it out, or it's based on common sense science, where you look at all the concerts that have gone through history, and you look at all the emotional events and correlating emotional events people have at these different concerts. Like if you watch just the audience members, right, of concerts throughout the time of history, and you don't see who's playing, you don't even hear the music, and you watch an amphitheater full of people, by and large, you can tell what kind of music's being, what kind of music's happening, what kind of musical experience are happening. I mean, if you see a crowd, like in a big amphitheater, and they're inspired and graceful and whatever, maybe there's like some beautiful classical music. And if you see a concert and there's a bunch of people going through like agonizing introspection and raging against the machine, maybe they're at a Tool concert. And really, the musical acts, they become known for their ability to produce certain emotional atmospheres. That's really what the musical acts, become known for. Oh, you got to go see so and so because they make you feel like this, or you go see so and so because maybe these social opportunities. People follow the Grateful Dead because they feel free and psychedelic and accepted, and people go to the LA Phil for a season because they want to be connected to music throughout antiquity and like certain types of thought processes. And so everybody gets, they sort of get a menu of artists and what those artists can provide in terms of a emotional immersive experience. And so that's kind of like the common sense science that comes out. And yeah, it does cut across the animals. Like I'm sure you've all seen the videos of people playing, like there's the famous video of the guy playing Für Elise on the piano for an elephant, and the elephant comes in and is like very heartfelt with the guy with the piano, and you can tell they have a connection. That connection is through music. You can tell the elephant is consciously registering an emotional experience, and they're bonding. And there's like a million examples. There's that famous video of those people playing music for the beluga whales, and that's kind of become a trend where people go to this one particular aquarium and they play music for the beluga whales, and they come in and they're obviously enjoying the music, which is really cool. So the music, that kind of flies in the face of the classical thinkers of music, who they really think that it's a mental construct, and they don't say it, but they kind of like imply that it's a human to human construct. They sort of imply that, right? But all of these transcendental instances of human to animal musical transmission, disprove, I think they show that music is a lot more than just an intellectual discipline that has a sonic output. which is what I'd say the reductivists are trying to say. That so they're trying to say, okay, cool, it's an intellectual pursuit, and then it's a sonic experience, and they're not trying to attribute any sort of like emotional resonance to it, even though it's kind of preposterous when you look at the history of music throughout human history. And then also, I mean, even something as basic back as like in India as like a snake charmer, right? Like what's a snake charmer? Like that cobra wants to listen to some music, right? And so when we get to these levels of understanding how music can affect the reality, how for sure we start with the idea that it's notes and sounds set to time in a certain context. In this classical setup, other questions are also asked of like, okay, what is it? Because let's say you have a composer, right? You have a composer and they're writing the music. Now, any of that music is just going to be like a particular replication of the emotional state that the composer or the artist is in, and they're channeling it into a form they call music, right? So they're hearing it and they're feeling it, and then they put it down. And the idea too is that like any subsequent playing of that music is just an attempt to replicate that moment in the state of the composer or the artist, which is pretty crazy, right? When you think about it, that they're trying to find a way for people to replicate a state of being. And in the sense that music is a set of tones set to time, you're really saying that it's time and space. You're really saying they're trying to replicate a time and space that creates an emotional atmosphere. They can also keep it in mind that the emotional atmosphere sets the tone for the intellectual epiphanies, for the spiritual epiphanies, for all of that thing. I mean, that's what, keeping in mind that many of the classical composers that we love throughout time, they plied their wares in the chapels of Western Europe. And they were specifically commissioned, and basically their livelihood depended on creating atmospheres for divine, worship or divine reception. And so when you look, and then also, so when you feel that, and then you go back and you look at the compositions for the intellectual discipline of the mathematics, the compositions, all those things, they tend to replicate the divinity, or they tend to replicate the emotion that they're trying to bring in, which is like fundamentally fascinating. So when they do that, and you realize, okay, they're just trying to replicate on paper an emotional and spiritual space in time and space, then the question is, okay, cool. Is the music that people, when they put that down and they play it for other people later, is that the same music? Right? It's an interesting question. The common sense answer is mainly yes. Is it exactly the same? No. But it's true to the spirit of that moment, that spirit of inspiration, that spirit of a coherent set of notes set against time coming in, an understandable one that makes us feel a certain way, one that takes us on a journey of emotions. It could be a really short pop song that hits like one particular issue, or it can be a lengthy symphony that takes us through a series of like epic emotions, right? Which brings us to another aspect of music. So there's certain types of music that have lyrics, and lyrics put a more pointed and shaped intellectual focus and context on music, and which can also further deepen the emotional experience. But at a minimum, it gives it a very sharp intellectual focus and tunes us into a specific moment. And then when you go from lyrical music, which definitely more formally fits into sort of the classic reductivist version of music, and then when we go into just purely instrumental music dispenses with all of the intellectualism and almost entirely concentrates on the emotional atmosphere. And then here is where music starts to become mystical. So in non-lyric based music, how is it that people gather together and without semantics without lyrical guidance, how is it that they start to have exceptionally similar emotional experiences? How is it that they come in and they have repeatedly similar emotional experiences? Simply with tones, with almost no guidance. They're feeling very similar emotions. With what? With vibratory frequencies coming through the air that we're calling music, but is it music? It's not real. I mean, it's just a vibratory mesh. It's a sonic mesh that's coming in, right? We call it music. I think we call it music to help ourselves conceptualize it and realize what a powerful force it is. But that's what it is. And it's shockingly, it's shockingly when we zoom out to look at the experience that people are having fundamentally similar experiences emotionally. So it seems to be like an indicator that there's a universality to the different tones, like we were talking about earlier. Certain frequencies, certain tones, certain notes, certain combinations, certain chords. And that's before we even get to the time syncopation. Produces certain emotional results, which of course produce, thoughts and emotions. So it does trickle back into your brain space, and you have good thoughts, right? Or whatever thoughts, you have thoughts. And it's rather extraordinary that for purely instrumental music, large groups of people have very similar emotional journeys. That alone points to the fact that music is something to be further examined, that it's more of a force than an art. I would say that music, I'm at the point where, having understood all the things we just sort of discussed, in the traditional view of music being a disciplined art form set to time, my experience with music was that that's one part of music, but that part of music is simply a way for us to be prepared to understand the music of life. Because in our world, everything is set to time. It is inescapable. Even transcendental meditation, where you pop out, you just get a different sense of time because we're still in physical body. And in the physical world that we're in, everything is set to time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything is set to time. There is no escape from time. So all of life is music, because all sounds are set to time in life. That is an inescapable fact. That is basic physics. This world is set to time, and this world is nothing but a collection of sounds on the auditory level. And to me, music, in the prescribed artistic sense, being an intellectual pursuit set to time and space with tones and music, in tones and notes, prepares our mind to be able to hear the actual music of life. Everything's set to time, and everything comes in and goes out. It's the creaking of the cars. It's the whistling of the bird. It's the thump, thump, thump of the jackhammer in the middle of the city. It's all these things that come into play. And it's continuous, and it never ceases. It's an eternal flow of music. It's why in the Bible they say in the beginning there was the Word, because the Word is music. Any vibration is music. Any auditory vibration is music. And it's the most fundamental force in existence. It's the most fundamental force in creation, because you have the void and then you have vibration, and the vibration is sound, right? It's before light. If science is to be believed, there's a void, then there's vibration, and then at some point the vibration either gets enough momentum or synergy or whatever sparks it into, then you get a photochemical reaction, or however they describe it, or bioluminescent, or not bioluminescent, but at a certain point it becomes light, right? But before that, there's sound. And that is the music of life. Because this entire existence is set to time. And this entire existence has sound. So in that way, to me, music trains us to hear life properly. It's a baby step. It's like, hey, wouldn't it be nice if you actually concentrated on the sounds for a while, and oh well, here's some sounds that make you feel things so that you get personally interested, whether it fires off your dopamine or your serotonin or makes you feel like good in your heart or gives you good thoughts. After a while of hearing music, and then you go, oh man, I really figure out how to analyze this and enjoy this auditory level and like allow it to move me and make me think and inspire me and do all these things, have these real effects on us. I mean, I think that's the real thing. Aside from the particular analysis of music, it's the fact that it's phenomenally powerful and moving for us, and it helps us to be in life and get through life and digest life, and it becomes a thing that gets so associated with us in our life and our emotions and our memories that it's essentially indistinguishable from life itself. So in that sense, to me, it's philosophically speaking, music is life. It's the fundamental force of life coming in, from, to put it, to make sure that we're clear here, like the ultimate base level of life is the electrostatic plasmatic light that is everything and nothing at once. It is God. It is the fundamental fabric of everything. Okay, just so that's said. And then the next level where it comes in, when it starts to come out of that form, which is eternal, but when it makes even the slightest move to come into material, corporeal form, a wave comes out, and that's a vibration, that's sound, and that's the first music. That's the first movement. That's the first movement of life, is music. So music, the first movement of life. Well, I'm not sure what else there is to talk about music. There's the artistic discipline of it. There's how it's perceived. There's how it's created. There's the question of how it's experienced. And I believe of the function it serves in our natural organic evolution in understanding the universe itself, from which it initially came as a primal fundamental force. So I think music is more of a force of nature than an aesthetic art form. I just think that many of us have decided to pursue it as an aesthetic artistic art form because it's extremely powerful and very enjoyable and very effective at communicating things. And music is its own language. So it's a beautiful language. It truly is. And it's a language that not just humans speak. I think it is, it's a universal language. I think it's more universal than, I think it might be the primary universal language. It might be more primary than math or physics or science or anything else. I think music might be the real deal. It might be the universal language. I mean, I guess technically there's vibing. We can meditate with aliens and other beings. So maybe body vibration, soul vibration, and then music. Okay, 1A and 1B. We'll have it your way. So music, the fundamental force of the universe, fundamental first movement of life. Well, I hope you enjoyed this time at Philosopher's Corner, and I hope you have a good day.